Today, for Frontline Conversations, I'm absolutely delighted to speak to an unusual guest, someone who's actually written 10 books. This is the 10th, which I'm holding in my hands. He's had an interesting life because he's traveled across India, he's written books on multiple subjects. And right now, this book is about Delhi. It's true crime of the most sensational nature, which delivered us the murderers called Billa-Ranga. It is about the killing of two children who were murdered brutally in Delhi in 1978. And he places the crime in a socio-political context. So it's an interesting work. And his own life is as interesting as some of the work that he's done, is that he's just emerged after 3 years in Dhaka, where he set up a South Asia study department in a particular university. And so my old friend, college buddy, someone who's beaten me in the number of books he's written, but who's on a journey, Sudeep Chakravarti. Sudeep, I'm so happy to talk to you today.
I'm delighted to be here, Saba, and also to, I hope, share our journeys, to talk about our mutual journeys as well. All yours.
So this book, now, first of all, this could be the rare Indian book which is well done true crime, because it reenacts the murder of two kids in Delhi's Ridge area, which shocked the country and had Delhi taken by storm in 1978. And eventually, it was a senseless killing, as many killings are. Uh, we never quite understand why it happened. And this is the murders of Geeta and Sanjay Chopra, two teenagers who set out from their house. She was headed to All India Radio for a program, and they were the children of a naval officer. And they just took a ride from someone, and they met a gory, gruesome end, and all of that unravels in the course of the book. So what's interesting is that it is a depiction of the true crime. I found it very disturbing to read the forensic report on their bodies, for instance. It's disturbing. We're living in an age when there is a lot of true crime on Netflix and stuff, but this is one of the rare Indian writers who has actually covered a huge sensational crime of that age. And the killers, the name Billa-Ranga is, even today, we associate that with sort of terrible criminals. They were eventually hanged,
Indeed,
and but their story, it's the randomness of the violence
indeed.
that struck me. So,
No,
Chakvi.
no, but you're absolutely right, Saba. It transfixed the nation, and one of the stories that we must share is that we are actually from the generation of Geeta and Sanjay. We could so easily have been them. I
Yeah.
think one of the reasons why we were transfixed as teenagers at that time
Mm,
is on account of there were people like us, middle class kids, who were trying to get ahead in life, doing interesting things, aspiring to get into what was being built to us at that point of time, not in 2024, but back in the late 70s and early 80s, as the brave new India.
mm,
And the symbol of brave new India, these bright young kids, are brutally taken away from society. And to an extent, you could say that Delhi and India went through its people like us moment, the PLU moment.
yeah.
But I think it transfixed people, it horrified people, it shocked people because of the sheer brutality of it and the sheer senselessness of it. It was so awkward. It was so almost planned and yet unplanned. And it was gory, it was gruesome, and it also, I think, it came at a certain time in India's dark arc or Delhi's dark arc, because when I was researching the book, and you might ask, why now? Why not? And what took me so long? It took me so long because, as a writer yourself, you would know that a, a book or a piece of writing has a certain organic time and place. It needs to come naturally. So maybe the opportunity to find a publisher who understood the book, the nuances of the book. Maybe I had finally found time for a certain sense of catharsis, of dealing with the time, uh, and also I think because I wrote it much later in life, many years after the events happened. and also after several years as a journalist and writer and academic
Mhm.
now, maybe I'm more mature in my view of the event, and that led me to immediately see and sense, perhaps, that it was in the center of Delhi's dark arc. And and because Delhi was the capital, is the capital, India follows in a way. What happens in Delhi, India either gains or loses from it, uh, and rarely is indifferent to it. So you had an arc that, for me, began with 1975, the beginning, the imposition of the emergency, then the cessation of the emergency, the opposition coming into play, the fall of the Congress empire, the Gandhi empire, the generation of the Janata government, the strange goings on like the hard Hindu right, conservative right, being a part of a coalition government with a left of center coalition. Very, very unlikely things were happening. uh, Pakistan was reaching out to India. Morarji Desai was in Nairobi inviting Ziaur Rahman to Ziaul Haq to his suite for talks, riding in the limousine. Uh, Janata was imploding already. Indira and Sanjay Gandhi were plotting their comeback. And in the middle of all this, Sanjay and Geeta, it was as if it was too much for Delhi to deal with.
Yeah.
And soon after that, it came out of it, and Billa and Ranga emerged as hyphenated villains. And and ironically, their names continue to us to this day, even though we tend to forget about Geeta and Sanjay. So, in a way, it was paying homage to people of my generation,
Mm.
dreams that were taken away so brutally. And soon after this, you had the Asian Games in Mrs. Gandhi, and Sanjay came back. Sanjay's incredible depth, uh,
Yeah, you mentioned all that
all
in
of
the
that,
book.
and then Asian Games, and then ending with the dark arc, the bookended by the arc of the anti-Sikh riots in 1984. So it seemed like a grim moment in Delhi's life and times. But it also gave me the opportunity to, as you said in the beginning, in your very gracious and kind introduction, that it gave me an opportunity to talk about something that could be described as true crime, but interweave it with the socio-political environment and actually the mood of the moment, what
Yeah.
was going through in people's minds. So it's a rare opportunity, and I'm very happy that I have it.
So what I think you've done, if you don't mind, you have researched the newspapers of a particular date,
Mhm.
let's say August 26,
Mhm.
1978,
Indeed.
and you have put in a lot of headlines what are happening simultaneously as the crime takes place on August 28th, if I'm not mistaken.
26th.
26th. So let's say. Then you say this is happening, that is happening. So there's research, there's some rigor that's gone into it.
Oh,
You have the postmortem reports, you've spoken to the hangman who hangs them. You've also spoken to a whole generation of journalists, which the media would know. You've spoken to people such as Usha Rai, Prabha Dutt, Aarti Gerard. These are all top-notch journalists of that time who actually met the family
mhm.
and covered this crime.
And
I mean, they were obviously our seniors, but one knows them. You know, you've sort of reenacted. So it's a journalistic exercise, it's a research exercise, and you've acquired all this material. So there's a certain rigor here. But one of the interesting things, since you are talking about the politics, is that Atal Bihari Vajpayee is part of the Janta government.
indeed.
In one of the bits, that's the bit that surprised me, which I didn't know.
Mhm.
Is that he's a minister, and this crime has taken place when Indira Gandhi is not in power
Mhm.
and the Janta government is in power. And there are protests happening,
Mhm.
huge protests happening in the boat club in Delhi. There's an odd, it's an odd moment to talk about this because even though the crime is different, the specifics are different. In Kolkata,
Mhm.
the city from where you are, and you've also written a book called The Bengalis, uh, there is currently a lot of protests over a crime inside a hospital, another senseless killing. But this one was two very young teenagers. But Atal Bihari Vajpayee goes to address the protesters at the boat club and he is hit with stones. Would you just tell us about that?
Indeed, and it's remarkable that most people don't realize that Atal Bihari Vajpayee was a member of the Janata government.
No, I know that, but
Yes, and most people don't realize that. So it was important when I was researching this. I spent months in archives looking through newspapers, clippings, microfilm, spools, hours after hour after hour after hour, week after week, month after month. So yes, there has been some rigor,
so
but it
just
was
give us the
necessary
incident.
to
No.
So to come to Atal Bihari Vajpayee's incident, it was remarkable that he took it upon himself that because he even then,
He
I
was
mean,
an affable guy.
he very affable, but he did have a certain conceit which he carried on later in life. He was a very approachable, affable person, which is why I guess he got on in the Janata government. He was welcomed and accepted till, of course, it all fell apart. But Atalji was, I think, always very aware of his supreme n- articulate nature. I think he was always very conscious, aware that he was an excellent speaker.
So he wanted to speak to the
He wanted to
protest.
speak and he wanted to calm things down. He saw his role as diplomat, the chief diplomat for India, but also in a way a chief diplomat for the government. And he just took it upon himself to go to the boat club. And there was nothing, I mean, those days there was no bandobast, if you will. So he just basically found a police jeep, and he just clambered onto the hood and started doing a soapbox to the students, and without and the protesters were largely students.
And they hit him with stones.
They pelted him with stones, so he got hit on the
And
forehead.
then he
There was
goes
a
to
gash.
parliament when he's bleeding.
As a bit of a drama queen,
Hmm.
I must say that as well because he's very aware of Atalji has always been very aware of theatre or of the time and place. He knows his moment. So he went to Willingdon, ironically the same place that Billa would go to get stitched up.
Willingdon Hospital, you
Willingdon Hospital,
know.
indeed, thank you. And Willingdon Hospital, and then he was sort of treated, and Atalji went to Parliament with a fellow MP. And of course, I mean, when you go, I mean, he knew the drama it would cause because he was in a white kurta pajama, and there was blood on his kurta. There was a bandage on his head, blood splotches on the bandage, and at, if this foreign minister walks into parliament and there's chaos, complete pandemonium, naturally. So it's quite the entrance and quite the discussion, and uh, of course everybody chips in, but in a way, it also highlights quite effectively the tragedy of Geeta and Sanjay, and it also highlights in the tremendous need that you that needs to be invested in India's policing, Delhi's policing, the capital of the country, where as then as now, the majority of the police force is invested in guarding VIPs and VVIPs and VVVIPs, and not enough for citizen protection. Sabka saath, sabka whatever, aapke saath, you know, I would
I
name
understand your point here.
all of
Just
that.
briefly, for the just tell us the ages of Sanjay and Geeta. Very briefly, what
Geeta,
just the bare facts of the case for
Geeta,
the
17-year-old, first year student of Jesus and Mary College, an aspiring MBA,
and the boy Sanjay
15,
was from my school,
15 Indian
modern school.
modern school,
Yeah.
15-year-old, and the and both fresh-faced youngsters, very bright, very aspiring, and the students of modern school,
Mm.
class 10, 11, 12, they came onto the streets. They marched from modern school right up until the boat club. They insisted on meeting with the president of India at the time, Neelam Sanjiva Reddy. They were, of course, fobbed off to a junior functionary, but they insisted. They gave a memorandum. They didn't give up there. They went and met the lieutenant governor of Delhi.
Yeah.
I managed to
I-
meet him. So they were uh, completely enraged
yeah.
that their comrades, their fellow student, could be taken away, and JMC students came out as
Yeah,
well.
of course. I think putting it in context, that was a sensational
Indeed,
crime, a
indeed,
tragic crime,
indeed,
and the killers became more famous than the victim in that case
as it happens.
because they got two names. These were their names, Billa-Ranga, and this is what they call
Indeed,
themselves. And so I think that's a very. It's also in the book. It does come through at times that it's also the famous murders that get noted, whereas
indeed,
there are,
indeed.
you have mentioned other crimes that
I-
were happening simultaneously because it was not socially that kind of story. It was not a middle class
Indeed.
narrative, they were ignored. So we know that is a pattern.
And I
Which
try to establish that.
you try to
that-
establish that. What's also a little bit of interest is also there that you also have the media sensationalizing certain, ventilating it. It's funny because that's a pre-television channel, social media age, yet that is also happening. There's a breathless attempt to get stories about
Indeed.
so who are the killers, what are the killers, and the killers are then caught by chance by
Indeed.
because they walk into a railway compartment full of military guys,
Indeed.
army jawans.
Indeed.
They walk in because they're going from one place to the other,
Indeed.
and the army jawans actually catch them. Otherwise, we don't know whether the police would have caught them. So it's a fascinating
It's a
reminder.
fascinating thing, and there was this great push to, because the public demanded answers. The government was keen to provide the public answers. Delhi police were very keen to be seen to be doing the right thing, to be doing good, to be standing up for the public, because there were glitches within the Delhi police that actually let the
Oh, yes.
murderers go. So they had things to prove. So all of it contributed to scraps of information being dug out randomly, even Billa and Ranga being made into these grand criminals with grand enterprise, with grand psychology and grand modus operandi, none of which were true. They ended up being very bumbling criminals.
It was just random. Na? They were just in the mood, one of them or the other.
Well, they were
They
looking
just
out.
picked up.
They were
picked
looking
up.
out. They were looking out for victims. They were
Yeah,
looking out for marks, as they called
yeah,
in
yeah,
America, and they spent the entire day cruising around Connaught Place and Central
yes.
Delhi. When they were about to give up, and this is in Ranga's confessional statement, which he later
I've
retracted,
read that.
but
Yeah.
that's another story, where he actually indicated that they were about to call it a day, literally, when they came across these two teenagers, and then the whole drama and the horror unfolded. And within hours,
Mm.
from beginning to end, 0 to 100, this took 4 hours, 5 hours
Yeah.
on the maximum, and you had a horrified nation at the end of it.
Yeah. And you also have anyway, it winds up with the death, the news, the hangman.
Indeed, indeed.
Anyway, Chucky, you've had a very interesting journey as a writer. So you've written multiple books. Actually, one of your books, which I really liked when it came out, was Red Sun, which is about the Nakshal movement.
Indeed.
You've written books on the Northeast.
Yes.
You've written, catch me if I'm missing. I'm not going to cover everything, but I'm just telling you the ones that I recall. And you've written a book called The Bengalis,
Indeed.
which is on the Bengalis.
It's a
And
biography of the Bengali people.
and you've written Battle of Plassey and so on and so forth. You've written Red Sun, and now you've written True Crime, as I see it. But your life's journey, obviously, each of these enterprises has involved an amazing amount of travel, being on the ground. So you've lived a life which is on the ground. You've done that, but you have spent the last 3 years in Bangladesh.
Yes, I have.
You were there,
Yes.
and you were there when Sheikh Hasina was deposed.
Yes.
When she came to India, you were sitting in Dhaka, and you had 3 years setting up a center for South Asian studies. And now that process, you have left Dhaka also. Would you just tell us about what was it like? What happened and what changed in Dhaka for
Well,
you?
it's a long
Tell us
and
about your 3 years as much as you can in a short time.
indeed, I'll be as brief as possible. And so I have a great engagement with Bangladesh uh, on account of the fact that when I was in the early 90s, I was one of the few people who believed in the idea of South Asia. So the magazine I was with at the time, India Today magazine, they actually bought into the idea and they let me travel all over South Asia. So I began to travel to Bangladesh as a journalist, as a reporter, writer, editor from the early 90s onwards. So I've actually seen for the past 30 years the transition of Bangladesh from a military dictatorship into democracy. My first visit as a journalist to Bangladesh was when Khaleda Zia was the prime minister, and I've interviewed Sheikh Hasina when she was the leader of the opposition. A very different Sheikh Hasina then to 30 years later, from a very sharp, affable, approachable uh, leader of the opposition to autocratic premier of a country, where she lived in an ivory tower and she lived in an echo chamber. Remarkable transformation. And I've had the good fortune to travel across Bangladesh, across geographically, across politically. I've even interviewed people who were considered to be hardcore, ultra conservative Islamists like Ghulam Azam, people who formed the Islamic Oikko Jot, the Islamic Union, along with BNP, Khaleda Zia's party, and some people,
Jamaat-e-Islami.
Jamaat-e-Islami
So
Bangladesh,
Ghulam Azam is the one whose son has now been released.
who's been released. And
So just tell me a little bit about that and then the
so
son.
so I've seen Bangladesh go into from a conservative phase to a self-professedly liberal secular phase, which became conservative in its own right because Awami League became more and more autocratic and the leaders became more and more autocratic. So you had the irony of a democracy becoming an autocracy over time.
Right.
And so Sheikh Hasina was a symbol of that. And I think it's necessary to explore this. So it the the situation became so autocratic that the son of Ghulam Azam,
Mm.
who is in Hindi would be called a Ugravadi,
Mm.
an
Yeah.
absolutely ultra conservative, radical Islamist person, can sound liberal because he's being finally allowed to speak after several years and being released from detention. So, ironically, the person who would otherwise would have said my way or the highway is now being vis-a-vis Sheikh Hasina and the Awami League now comes off as a person saying, I mean well for Bangladesh. Imagine the irony of it that a radical Islamist is being seen saying, oh, okay, he makes sense. Let's listen to him because we haven't been able to listen to him and we haven't had the opportunity to make up our own minds
About him.
about him or anybody because the government had decided to
It
make
was
up our minds
autocracy.
for us. And so it's
So
gone.
it's like a pressure cooker, the
Indeed,
lid has
indeed.
gone
And
off.
it needed a spark. And the spark was provided. There was immense corruption, numbing nepotism. And I'm using mild words, Saba, for reasons of
At the
propriety.
same time, Bangladesh was doing so well on development indices. How do we
So
put
it
this?
did. But I always describe it to my students and also when I write and when I speak as inequity. So you have a situation where Bangladesh, like India,
Mm.
has tremendously positive growth. Its infrastructure has grown by leaps and bounds. It is a forward-looking country economically, socially, in many, many indices. Human resource
It's a more equal society than India.
in many ways, in many more equitable society than India in many ways. And yet,
Mm.
because of the command and control, political command and control, you effectively have had for the last 10 years an increasingly autocratic and self isolating power structure, which has no truck with what the remainder of the Bangladeshis think about them because they don't need to. They are in an autocratic bubble of their own making.
Mm.
And that is also the reason why many institutions, your political institutions, judicial institutions, and policing institutions in Bangladesh were weakened on account of this autocracy. And Sheikh Hasina was at the apex. She was the leader. So she went from this leader of the opposition, this smart alecky, wisecracking, supremely sharp, uh, young, sort of youngish lady to this absolutely my way or the highway autocrat. And so the economic progress, unfortunately, because of nepotism and cronyism, you have growth at certain levels, but I would describe it as a comet. So the head of the comet was the growth, invited to the growth party, but not the tail of the comet. And that was almost a few light years away. There was a disconnect. So there was great resentment because there was food inflation. Corruption meant there were tens of billions of dollars being taken away from Bangladesh by crony capitalism. So Bangladesh was inherently weakened from within by
By the
people,
autocracy.
by the autocracy, by the
So,
kleptocracy.
so I want to then, but today, from the outside,
Mhm.
obviously, I don't know what is happening inside. When there is chaos, then the only organized people, to me, from a distance, seems to be the Jamaat-e-Islami. And the Jamaat-e-Islami, to the way I understand history, were the very people who opposed the liberation of Bangladesh by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman.
Indeed.
And they wanted to stay with Pakistan because Pakistan is built on the idea.
Mhm.
Pakistan, the land of the Muslims, which is a faulty idea.
Mhm.
The two nation theory is a bad idea. So, given all that, so is it the same? Isn't there something terribly perverse about these cycles of history? And will they now take over?
I
And
would,
will it become Islam?
well,
So, there are three questions here. Is it not the same people? Please tell us
mhm.
who oppose liberation from Pakistan. Am I right about that?
Yes, and the Islamists, the hardcore, hardline Islamists of Bangladesh, present-day Bangladesh, were opposed to the liberation of Bangladesh, of East Pakistan, Purba Bongo, and which is why when Sheikh Mujib came to power,
Mm.
they were in recession. They
Mm.
were on the run, literally on the run. when the BNP took power,
Hmm.
the first run, 1991 to 1996, they were in power. And many of the cases against them were dropped. People who were described as war criminals became part of the cabinet. They were
Okay.
part of government, literally partners in government. And when Sheikh Hasina and the Awami League came back to power for keeps, as it were, because she was elected for the fourth time, even though it was a shambolic elections for the last two elections, electoral cycles. They, Awami League and Sheikh Hasina in particular, went after the same people. So the same people who were in cahoots with the BNP to a great extent were tracked down. They were put on trial, public trial, which the public demanded. So you had the public of Bangladesh going out into areas like Saba, which is like the port club of Dhaka, if you will, and demand that these war criminals who had butchered the people of Bangladesh or were complicit in the genocide of 1971 and also complicit in hacking bloggers, killing bloggers, attacking them with machetes, attacking secular people with machetes, declared atheists with and killing and butchering them. They are the ones who the public of Bangladesh went to town literally and demanded that they be brought to justice, and they were brought to justice, often capital justice. So
Hanged.
they
They
were
were
hanged, they
hanged.
were executed largely, and so there was seemed to be a sort of an emotional closure
Mm.
to 1971, if you will. But the flip side of that was accumulation and accretion of absolute power to the Awami League and therefore to Sheikh Hasina and her cohorts and her echo chamber.
In what unfolded recently, since you
Yes,
were there in Dhaka,
yes.
were Hindus specifically targeted, or were they targeted because they were supporters of the Awami? What is the story there? So much in India was about that.
I think that is a there's a
You
classic.
are a Hindu. You were living there. You
Yeah,
were in. You. I don't know what you. You know. I mean.
but I mean, I didn't feel insecure, but maybe because I'm trained as a journalist,
Mm.
so I don't when I'm out. So in a way, even when I'm teaching, I'm in my heart and soul, I remain a journalist. So my
No, I'm asking you this.
I
Were
and I've
people
answered.
targeted for their? Were they
I,
hunting down?
no, I get your question. I'm just sort of personalizing it to tell you that I didn't feel insecure at any point of time. But that doesn't mean that others did not. So there were instances of Hindus being attacked, and also, like in East Pakistan's history and Bangladesh's history, minorities in general have been attacked from time to time whenever there's been a political dislocation, which has sort of let loose the dogs of war, if you will, where, in anarchy, people who can leverage command and control, they will always try to go and grab whatever power they possibly can. And this is a classic case of a repeat, if you will. It's happened several times in Bangladesh's existence. It's happened in
Mm.
East Pakistan's time also. When there has been political anarchy
Mm.
and there've been political transitions,
Mm.
typically the minorities have been attacked. They were attacked this time also because there was a power vacuum,
Right.
but they were absolutely not attacked to the level which Indian media were
Okay.
dog whistling the whole episode. That was completely blown out of proportion.
Okay.
That I would imagine is a mixture of misinformation riding on disinformation. I want to categorically state this.
Yeah. Thanks for that, because there's a
Uh, uh,
lot of confusion
no,
about that.
there shouldn't be any confusion about that. And I think I want to stress this point that very quickly, and by then the interim government was in power, there were neighborhood watches being kept in Dhaka when instances of some temples being attacked, some Hindu businesses being attacked, some shops being burnt. All this did happen. Nobody's denying them. But you right now, Sabah, have Hindu organizations in Bangladesh beseeching Hindu organizations in India, saying, "Will you please let us be Hindus in Bangladesh because we are
Yeah.
quite all right. Thank you very much. We
No,
don't need your help."
we don't need
Number
your
one.
help.
Number two, I have seen, and Bangladesh has seen, that it's not a perfect situation and it's not safe for anybody, including the Hindus. Neither is Bangladesh entirely safe right now because of its vulnerable situation, its transitional situation for the Muslims of Bangladesh too,
Mm.
right?
Right. Right.
Because anarchy affects
Yeah.
everybody. They're, the true stories that have not been played up, amped up as much in Indian media for obvious reasons, perhaps, is that you had Jamaat people,
Mm.
neighborhood watches, standing guard like actually it happened in 1984 in Delhi, where neighborhood watches. I lived in house cars, so there were neighborhood watches to protect Sikh families within our enclaves and the gurdwaras whenever could. So there were Muslims, dyed in the wool Muslims, literally visibly
For
Muslim
there to
Muslims,
protect.
who were there to protect uh, Hindu places of worship,
Of
whether
course, 1984, there was a much
indeed,
real bloodbath.
indeed,
So it didn't work, the neighborhood watches.
indeed. But here you
Here,
actually
yeah,
had
you
neighborhood
actually had.
watches, and things have cooled down, I would imagine, quicker, given the fact that it's a transitional government in place, an interim government. There is no political party in power right now. And the police are discredited because they were part
Did they change their constitution?
there's talk about it. And let me quickly bring you up to speed on that. That uh, there is a demand, and there's another thing that I think in India we don't appreciate is that how closely India has been identified with the autocracy. Unfortunately, that too is true.
Please elaborate, because we were seen as propping up,
Indeed,
helping
and
Sheikh.
that is correct because right, and it is important to understand the sequence of events. And in India, a certain group of people, a certain section of political society is fond of chronology. So let me present a little chronology to
Okay.
you. When July 1st, the protests kicked off to essentially protest a reservation, which would
Yes.
take jobs away and give it to the grandchildren of freedom fighters,
Freedom
not
fighters.
even the children. So in a economy under some stress, when employability and unemployment remain fragile issues or tension driven issues within the subcontinent, like in Bangladesh and India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Pakistan, everywhere. Uh, Similarly, they were demanding it. The counter reaction from the government was of a species that refused to listen. They could have diffused it instantly. In fact, one of the things that I kept hearing from people in power, in politics, in business, before Sheikh Hasina was deposed on August 5, was it didn't need to come to this
Absolutely.
again and again and again. Why didn't they listen? Why didn't they? So at a time when Awami League thugs were let loose on students of Bangladesh, when the Dhaka Metropolitan Police and the police across Bangladesh were let loose on the students of Bangladesh, when you had paramilitary units firing on citizens in my neighborhood in Dhaka and killing children on the rooftops as young as 4 and 6 who were written off as collateral damage because the regime had to survive at any cost. And uh, when people began to be attacked and killed on the streets, passers-by, parents who would come out, educators who would come out in support of the students, when all this was going on, the statements from India right up until almost the last day
Mm.
was we believe in Bangladesh's security. Uh, Awami League has been a good friend to Bangladesh. Sheikh Hasina has been has been a good friend to India. My apologies. And Sheikh Hasina has been a good friend to India at a time when Sheikh Hasina was triggering these mass arrests and disappearances and attacks on citizenry, including students, high school students who have been killed and attacked, Saba. My students from my university were beaten up by Awami League councillors in conjunction with student league goons, in conjunction with the police.
Okay.
You know,
So it was a very troubling,
very
very
troubling. My
troubling.
students are
So
traumatized. So
India's statements at that point seemed
were
shocking to
were
you.
seen absolutely and uh, obtuse and smacking of being completely out of touch, being completely disconnected from the reality on the ground in Bangladesh. Because it's okay to have allies. We all look for allies
Yeah.
for national interest. So it's a very natural thing to
It
do.
shows a terrible intelligence failure, bad briefing from the mission.
I think it was an intelligence failure, not just of intelligence of the sort of the khufia aspect of intelligence, but intelligence period. I think people were into brain freeze when
How
Bangladesh and Sheikh
interesting.
Hasina was concerned. So India was seen as propping up this autocrat who was killing people. So therefore, people in Bangladesh, many people in Bangladesh, find India to be complicit in the misdeeds of Sheikh Hasina.
I see.
And that is a tricky space to navigate. Sabah, you will appreciate this when. So I think, and I've been writing about this, I've been speaking about it
Yes.
regularly, and I keep saying India for the last year and a half to 2 years, I've been screaming from the Dhaka rooftops, to use a figurative
You have a
term,
column in a
indeed,
Dhaka
the Dhaka
paper.
Tribune, and I've been writing in India as well, saying, please recalibrate your outlook to Bangladesh. Please recalibrate your foreign policy. Please, in India's national interest, please see the situation on the ground. Please be realistic.
Mm.
Don't be obtuse. Wake up to what the people of Bangladesh are telling you. Do not limit interaction to government or G to G. Please pay attention to what the citizens of Bangladesh are
Yeah.
talking, and please open your eyes to the mood on the ground. I don't think anything of that happened. And unfortunately, India today is paying a price for its obtuseness and its brain freeze over Bangladesh, like it did pay a price in Nepal and in Myanmar. It's a disaster.
So, yeah, well, can I ask you a question? Because some of the disturbing images was not just Sheikh Mujib's statues being
Indeed,
brought down,
indeed.
Rabindranath Tagore. Now, one of the beautiful things which I always thought is a sign of language over religion is that Rabindranath Tagore's Amar Shonar Bangla
Amar
is
Sholar,
the national anthem of Bangladesh,
indeed,
right?
as Jana Gana Mana is to India.
Yeah.
The one
So
person
the
who
same
has,
person.
yeah,
So, do you think all of that will change in the future Bangladesh? Do you think they might even have a new national anthem, or will
I
that?
I don't think they would have a new national anthem because there has been a pushback to demands of having a new national anthem by just 3 days ago, if I'm not
Oh,
wrong.
okay.
All across Bangladesh, people gathered on the streets to sing Amar Sonar
Oh,
Bangla.
how lovely! I
Yeah,
didn't know
I think
that.
it was a viral moment.
So that won't happen. So
I don't
Tagore,
think it
in
happened in a
Rabindranath
hurry,
Tagore's primacy,
but I don't think
who were the people who were bringing down the statues of? It's like bringing down, to my mind, Gandhi or
indeed. But imagine then,
uh,
just let me put it to
yeah,
you, that how deep the resentment against Sheikh Hasina had gone and how much of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujib was imposed on people. I
that
can
they
see
turned against him.
because I can tell you that August, 15th of August, he was assassinated in 1975.
When did you leave Bangladesh?
I left quite recently, and
You got an aircraft, a flight?
I did, but I don't want to go into the logistics of it because I think uh,
Okay, okay.
that we can talk about as
Oh,
friends
okay,
as the
okay,
thing. But
okay,
my departure was exciting. Let me put it that way. I don't want to overstress my own situation
okay, okay.
because here we have an entire country dislocated. So me as one person, I wouldn't
Yeah, okay. So,
So,
so
but let me
Rabindranath Tagore, the
and
national
Sheikh
anthem
Mujib
remains. Yeah.
and also Sheikh so far. But imagine the resentment
Mm.
that and I want to stress the imposition of Sheikh Mujib, where the currency notes all have his facsimile, his face on it. We went, so August was a month of mourning by declaration, by government decree. Educational institutions had to mourn August. Eh, They
When he
were
was assassinated.
assassinated. We were compelled. All institutions across Bangladesh, government and public institutions, were compelled to have a structured list of things to do in August, how to commemorate the morning of 15th of August. It was micromanaged by the government of Bangladesh in order to sort of inject into every sinew of Bangladesh the memory of Sheikh Hasina, of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and implicitly the association of Bangabandhu Konna, of Bangabandhu Kanya, the daughter of Bangabandhu Sheikh Hasina.
Ah,
So that was driven down by hammer fist. That was driven down by government decree. It was
okay.
imposed. So imagine the pent up emotion where you are imposing things, and when the dam breaks, when Bangabandhu Kanya is the one doing the killing, ordering the killing and the imposition of killings of the people of Bangladesh whom she's sworn to protect.
Ah,
Imagine then the rage. I'm not condoning it. I was horrified when the statue was brought down, and many statues have been destroyed of
yeah.
Sheikh Mujib across Bangladesh, and collaterally across Bangladesh, other statues of uh, other intellectuals. Rabindranath Thakur statues have been
That's the
defaced,
one that disturbed
but
me a
but
lot.
but
I saw Rabindranath
but
statue.
equally, let me add that cultural activists, sculptors, pooled in their resources and they went and with their own hands fixed as many statues as they could
Okay.
of Rabindranath Tagore. Bangladesh has a very fond space for Rabindranath Tagore, as they do for Nazrul Islam and other
Yes.
greats.
Nazrul Islam, of course.
Indeed.
He's,
So imagine the rage, therefore. I mean, take it as a QED moment
mm,
of outrage for it to spill over to
yeah.
such an extent that You would have, like, Saddam Hussein's statue was brought down in Baghdad. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's brand new statue literally
Yeah.
set up last
No,
year was brought down.
I'm coming from a cultural space where I always like the idea of linguistic unity
Indeed,
over religious. That's my
absolutely,
absolutely, and I think Bangladesh at times shows us that we can have the same national anthem.
indeed,
You know.
indeed.
So now I want to flip for 5 minutes.
Mhm.
The Bangladesh story is, of course, eternal. Since you are a Bengali and you've written a book called Bengalis, and I know
And I'm alive. So because I'm alive, I've survived both Bengalis in India and overseas, and I've also survived
Bengalis.
Bengalis in Bangladesh, and the
Okay.
book contains all of them.
So now I
Okay.
just very quickly, because soon after the events in Bangladesh, which all of us in India followed, uh, we saw this protest coming out in Calcutta.
Indeed,
In the beginning, there was some superficial commentary that the Bengalis this side got instigated by the protest. But it's obviously taken a life of its own.
indeed.
So, do you see very quickly? Do you think that what has happened in India is entirely different because India is different? This attack on the current chief minister. Do you have any insights to offer? Basically, I also am not very clear.
No, I think the the outrage or the atrocity in RG Hospital in Kolkata
Yeah,
happened around the time that the protest movement and the killings had peaked in
in
Bangladesh,
Bangladesh. Yeah,
and the departure of the hasty departure of Sheikh Hasina coincided with that. So I think the public mood in Bangladesh did spill over. I think inspirationally, if you will,
Bengal.
to Bengal, to Kolkata, and to other parts of Bengal,
Mhm.
and in many ways across India, because
Yeah.
there was outrage. But I think it has taken on a life of its own, even though it might be called inspirational, if you will,
Hmm.
a sort of the Bengal Spring in terms of the public protest,
Yeah.
but it was for different reasons altogether,
Entirely, entirely.
entirely different reasons. So you are right. It, I think, has a life of its own. And that actually brings us back to the loop of Fallen City, where we outrage over crimes against women,
Hmm.
and of course, that was Geeta and Sanjay, a boy too.
Yeah.
But repeatedly, we have Nirbhaya. Here we have Tilottama in Kolkata.
Yeah.
We seem to outrage over these i- grotesque atrocities being perpetrated. And it's 45 years since Geeta Chopra and Sanjay Chopra's death, and several years since Nirbhaya, and several years since a Netflix series on Nirbhaya and Tilottama, and so many unspoken and
Yeah.
unheralded atrocities across India. It's just a shame and a tragedy that the criminal justice system of India, in all these decades, have not been able to keep pace with the needs of the security of the women and children and the citizenry of India.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a tragic deficit,
Yeah.
and I don't know how we can overcome this. But I do like, and I don't want to mansplain this
No,
at
I
all.
don't want you to. I just to get back to the original
Indeed,
question.
indeed,
Bangladesh and Bengal,
indeed.
two countries,
Right.
two different a partition. How different are they? Very quick.
Very similar
I
and
want.
yet very different, because I think most people in Bengal, Indian Bengal,
Mm.
and it's where people in Bengal live. I cooked up a term for it. I invented a term for it. I call it Bangla sphere. That is my definition of wherever
Yeah.
Bengalis live. Right. So Bangladesh is part of Bangla sphere. So is West Bengal. But I think they're very distinct entities, which ironically and to my mind tragically, many people in West Bengal either don't get
Mm.
or do not wish to acknowledge
Mm.
that Bengalis in Bangladesh are Bengalis too, that you have an entity, you have a Bangladeshi life of its own, that you have the fact that the country is called Bangladesh, the land of the Bengalis, the
Where
land of
is
the
the
Bengali
cultural?
people.
Where is the better Bengali literature coming out of? Let me
Well,
ask you. Is Bangladesh vibrant?
Bangladesh considers itself to be a repository of Bengali culture, of the Bengali language. You have Bangla Academy in Dhaka,
Mm.
you have the Bangla Academy in Dhaka, but you don't really have a Bangla Academy of that sort as
My
a
God,
certain.
you can't say that about West Bengal.
I
An
did.
Indian Bengali.
Saba, I can say this because I've actually in the book, The Bengalis, I've gone out and said that I find the Oriya Rasagolla,
Huh?
to be of superior quality to the
Okay.
Bengali Rasagolla. I've said this and I have lived and thrived.
Yeah.
So I'm a risk taker by nature. So
So yeah, I'm curious because
the-
here you have a
and
study of two. You have
in the
East and West Germany.
so
You have literature coming out of East. You have
very high quality.
specifically divided.
Have high quality. You have high quality literature coming out of Bangladesh. There's a peculiarity to Bangladeshi literature. They love the short story form. So a lot of the writing that comes out of Bangladesh, in terms of fictional writing, there's a lot of poetry, like in West Bengal, but there is a remarkable volume of short stories. Bangladeshis love short stories.
Okay.
They're just in love with them.
They also have a epic photographer, and the name is just. He's a great guy. He's a photographer. He's just missing my mind. I've seen some
No, but
photos.
I mean, they have many fine people. They have excellent academicians. In fact, the chief advisor to the interim government, Mohammad Yunus, won the Nobel
Himself is a
Prize for
Nobel
his
Prize.
work
Yeah. I'm
in
wondering
microcredit.
this demand to get Sheikh Hasina back. Would they like to hang her, or can we?
No, I think there is here. I don't know if hang, but they would like to see justice be done to her, and justice be done to be seen to be done for the people of Bangladesh.
Yeah,
That's very
which means
clear. But
India's
right
guest.
now, I think there is going to be a sort of a diplomatic chess game that is going on, where because India gave shelter to Sheikh Hasina as a great friend and ally, which is all well and fine, but you do need to then keep in mind the repercussions of that. So I think Bangladeshi diplomats, in their place, I would that I might that use the fact that Sheikh Hasina continues to be in India
Mm.
as a diplomatic lever to gain diplomatic concessions for Bangladesh, which is, I think, quite the right thing to do because there are many
Okay.
extant issues which
Okay.
were dampened during Sheikh Hasina's premiership. For instance, the sharing of river waters. There are 54 rivers from India that decant into Bangladesh. It is not just the Ganga Padma or the Ganga Padma or the Brahmaputra Jamuna, but there are 52 other rivers that
Okay.
also decant into
Wow.
Bangladesh. We need to sort that out. There need to be a river water commission like the Mekong River Commission between India, Bangladesh, and Nepal. That needs to happen. It was completely stalled. Mamata Banerjee needs to get her act together and not stall an agreement over the Tista to save her vote bank in North Bengal, in northwestern Bengal. It
Okay.
needs to, I think the stakes are way too high right now. And for national interest, India needs to be engaging with Bangladesh much more proactively than it has been. To my mind, they've been treating Bangladesh like many other countries of South Asia, and I've written this and spoken about it frequently, as a zamindari. India is the zamindar and South Asia is the zamindari. There has been, even with outreach and with regional outreach, there has been a tendency to overreach as well. And I think it is no coincidence that you've had senior officials of the Ministry of External Affairs make damage control visits to the Maldives, make damage control visits to Nepal, and I expect they will have to very soon make
Do
damage
that with,
control
I'm
visits to
sure, they
Bangladesh.
will get down to it.
Indeed, that needs to happen.
So, Sudeep Chakravarti, Chucky, as I call you, we were in
Indeed.
the same course in
Indeed.
Stephen's College in
In St.
history,
Stephen's College.
and you've had a journey.
And
You've
as
had,
a view, Saba,
you know, we've not done the conventional IAS
not
route,
at all.
but all our classmates were sitting for the UPSC exams.
Well, many of them. Let's not dismiss them or diss
No,
them.
no, I
Uh,
admire
to,
them.
to, to,
I thought it
uh,
was too much, but a lot of them, and here we are, both
here we are. We were the loose cannons then in class. You were the female loose cannon. I was the male loose cannon of history honors,
Yeah.
Stephen's College of our batch.
Uh,
And I think we remain loose cannons. And I think
those cannons are a good thing.
I think they're
I think our
wonderful
lives have been incredibly interesting, though.
because
Whatever
we've lived on our mutual journeys. We've
journeys, travel,
journeys, travels, professional, personal, geographic travels.
yeah,
We've been, I think, greatly experiential. We
mm,
have looked for experiences,
yeah,
uh, abhigyata, to use
yeah.
the Tate Hindi term. And I think, and here we are, old
Here
friends.
we are, and I have
And,
to interview you because you've written 10 books.
but Sabah, you've not,
Unbelievable.
no, but you
So
haven't done
this
so
is the
badly
book.
yourself.
I know this is the
Uh,
book, current one, and I'm sure we are going to see a book on Bangladesh, which will be fascinating. There's going to be an 11th, and if I know Sudeep Chakravarti, Chucky to me, there'll be a 12th.
And a 13th and a 14th.
Yeah,
Here's
but this is the book from Delhi to Dhaka.
Thank you.
Next, I hope to see a book from Dhaka. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Sabah.
Yeah, thank you.